Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating, deep dive discussion on a question that's literally sparked debates for centuries. What does it actually mean to live out the Christian faith? We're going to be unpacking some incredible insights from a modern men's fellowship. This is a group that recently got together with one main goal: to completely strip away all the cultural baggage and religious traditions and look squarely at what the biblical text itself actually reveals. And honestly, this discussion is packed. We've got historical context, some really bold theological concepts, and most importantly, highly practical daily takeaways you can actually use. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is a quick roadmap of where we're headed. First, defining the Christian life. Second, 2 types of birth. Then, how to magnify Christ, prayer as the fuel, and finally, living the daily walk. Section 1. Defining the Christian life. So the fellowship was super intentional about drawing their definitions strictly from the text. They totally ignored modern assumptions or traditional ways of thinking. Which brings us to the big question. What is the Christian life according to the Bible? I know, it sounds like a totally simple question, right? But the way they answered it actually challenges a lot of what we might assume. Because, as it turns out, the foundation of this life goes way, way deeper than just trying really hard to be a good person or rigidly following some strict set of rules. Section 2. 2 types of birth. To really answer that overarching question about human existence, the guys in the fellowship outlined a really stark contrast. Basically, physical birth produces what the Bible calls the flesh, a human nature that's inherently flawed, sinful, and let's face it, housed in a physical body that is ultimately decaying. But the Christian life, according to their study, relies on something entirely different: a spiritual birth. Entering God's kingdom actually requires this supernatural second birth. And this wasn't just a poetic metaphor for them. They view it as a tangible reality, where a completely new spiritual life begins growing within the believer, totally separate from their physical existence. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. They pointed straight to the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 6, which lays it out perfectly. That of which is born of flesh is flesh, and that of which is born of spirit is spirit. Through the resurrection, Christ essentially became a life-giving spirit that enters the human spirit. What does that mean? It means the believer is literally sharing a life with the divine. Section 3, how to magnify Christ. Now, all of this brings up a massive question. If a believer has this entirely new supernatural spiritual birth, what are they actually supposed to do with it? Well, the goal is to magnify Christ. Simply put, to magnify means making something appear larger and more visible to the people around you. One of the speakers used a highly memorable analogy here that I absolutely love. He said, living the Christian life is not about imitating Jesus from the outside. It's not like a monkey putting on a business suit and trying his hardest to act like a human. No way. Instead, it's about letting this new inner spiritual life naturally become visible to everyone you interact with. To really anchor this idea, they turned to the Apostle Paul and his letter to the Philippians. Paul makes this striking realization, writing, "For me to live is Christ." The fellowship pointed out something crucial here. Paul realized that he and Christ weren't 2 separate entities just awkwardly trying to get along. Not at all. They lived together as one person. Christ was Paul's life, and Paul was simply the outer vessel, magnifying Christ's living to the world. But we absolutely have to contextualize Paul's reality here, or it loses its punch. Remember, this guy was a former strict Pharisee. He used to literally persecute Christians. And when he wrote about magnifying Christ, he wasn't sitting back in a comfortable office sipping coffee. He was a prisoner in Rome. He was literally chained to a Roman guard, facing immense physical suffering and looking at potential execution. Yet his ability to continually magnify Christ under those conditions, it absolutely proves that this kind of spiritual living does not depend on having an easy, comfortable physical life. And the results of Paul having this mindset, they were astounding. There's this fascinating historical detail hidden right at the end of Philippians. Paul is sending greetings from the believers in Rome, and he casually adds, especially those of Caesar's household. I mean, just think about that for a second. The emperor at the time was Nero, a guy historically known for being exceedingly cruel, deeply immoral, and flat-out evil. Yet, because Paul simply magnified Christ while chained to his guards, people living within the evil emperor's own palace saw it, they were converted, and they became believers. For the fellowship, this historical fact proves the absolute power of true magnification. Section 4, prayer as the fuel. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we shift from ancient biblical history to modern actionable advice. If that kind of radical living is the goal today, how do we actually get there? Well, one of the fellowship members hit the nail on the head. He said, prayer is the fuel that enables us to magnify Christ. If magnifying Christ is the true goal, then prayer isn't just some boring religious chore you check off a list. It is the direct mechanism. It's the absolutely necessary action needed to power that spiritual connection. To explain the mechanics of how this works, they looked at Romans 8:6. The mind is portrayed here as this constant, fierce battleground. Think of it like this. If you let your mind get dragged down into the flesh, your physical frustrations, traffic, anger, all those worldly worries, the text says the result is spiritual death. But on the flip side, if you actively set your mind on the Spirit, the result is life and peace. So how do you forcefully set your mind on the Spirit when life is getting chaotic? The fellowship completely agreed you do it through constant, active prayer. So the men started discussing some highly relatable, everyday habits to keep their minds set on the Spirit. And yeah, sure, morning prayers, praying over meals, and having some quiet time before bed, those are great staples. But one member shared this fantastic, very modern tip. He actually uses technology to fight spiritual drift. He sets a daily alarm on his smartphone for exactly 11:11 a.m. The label on the alarm? It just says, "Thank God." It's brilliant. No matter what stressful meeting he's in or what frustration he's dealing with, when that alarm goes off, it literally forces him to pause, check his mindset, and reconnect with the Spirit. Section 5, Living the Daily Walk. Let's move to and see how this builds into real life. Because, hey, it's one thing to talk about high-level theology and phone alarms, and it's a whole other thing to apply it to the intense friction of our daily lives. The group actually built a practical 3-step method for this. Take the real-world challenge of dealing with a difficult employee or getting into a heated argument. Instead of just lashing out from the flesh, the method is super simple. Step 1, pause before responding. Just stop. Don't let your raw emotions dictate the moment. Step 2, pray a short, instant internal prayer, acknowledging that you need the Lord's help to express Him, not yourself. And step 3, respond with the grace and patience that the Spirit supplies. It's really just about letting the Spirit do the talking. As the fellowship meeting was winding down, one of the elder members shared some truly profound wisdom. He admitted that, younger men often stress themselves out, always asking things like, what is my grand mission in life? What massive thing am I supposed to be doing? But his conclusion was beautifully simple. He said, don't overthink it. Your mission is simply to walk daily and serve the Lord in every single interaction. Whether you're at the office, sitting at home, or just standing in line at the grocery store, your job is just to be a positive, Christ-like influence in completely ordinary days. So the crucial point is really captured in this one provocative question. We all know our physical bodies, our flesh, are temporary. We know they're slowly fading away. But while your physical body fades, is your spiritual body growing? Are you actually using your daily interactions and those little moments of prayer as fuel to magnify something so much greater than yourself? It's an incredibly powerful concept to reflect on, regardless of where you might be in your own personal journey. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll see you next time.